I never thought I'd be that guy, the one spilling all his dirty laundry on the internet, but here I am. Honestly, I need to get this out, and maybe someone out there can tell me I'm not a complete idiot. My wife, Sarah, and I had been together for 6 years. We were far from perfect, but I always believed we had a solid, if sometimes shaky, future. That was until I found out she cheated on me with my best friend, Mark. All started on a day that should have been one of the hardest, but I guess it was also the day I uncovered the worst betrayal. My mother was dying. She'd been sick for months, and I was lying in that hospital room holding her hand, feeling her grip weaken with every passing second. The whole family was there, sisters, aunts, everyone. The air was thick with grief and unspoken tension. Sarah called me that morning. She'd been out of town on a business trip but said she'd be back in time for the funeral. I was grateful, even though part of me felt guilty for hoping she'd show up. When I finally got home that evening, I was exhausted. My mother had passed just an hour earlier, and I was sitting in the living room trying to process the loss. It was dark outside. I remember the faint glow of the filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows that looked like they were trying to swallow me whole. I heard footsteps upstairs. Sarah was supposed to be coming home soon. I headed to the bedroom to change out of my suit, tired to the bone. That's when I saw it. The phone. Her phone, lying face down on the bedside table. Nothing unusual there, but what caught my eye was a series of messages. I didn't even have to unlock the screen. The messages were open. She'd left them there on purpose. The first few made my stomach turn. Flirty texts, secret emojis, teasing little phrases that made it clear she was more than just talking. But it was the last message that made me freeze stiff. It was from Mark. Just a simple "can't wait to see you tonight, been too long." My breath caught. My hands started to sweat. I felt this wave of coldness rush through me, like I'd been punched in the gut. I looked at her phone, then at the door. My mind was reeling. How long had this been going on? Did I miss the signs? I thought about the little things, her late nights, the evasiveness when I asked about her whereabouts, the strange text messages. I remembered her being oddly distant lately, avoiding my questions, her phone always hidden. I quietly grabbed her phone and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't want to confront her just yet. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe through the chaos. The whole world felt like it was crashing down around me. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone in the house could hear it. I felt sick, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling the images of those messages, the betrayal, the lies. The worst part, I knew this wasn't just a one-night stand. They'd been hiding this for months. I remembered the little things, her sudden trips, the bathroom visits that lasted too long, the way she always kept her phone close. It all clicked now like a dam. Breaking. The next day I decided I had to find out the truth once and for all. I needed to see if there was more. I set a trap. I knew Mark's schedule and I knew Sarah's routines. I planned to catch them in the act. I didn't want to just confront her blindly. I wanted proof. I wanted to see them together with my own eyes in the act of betraying me. That night I waited in the dark, hidden behind the bedroom door. My palms were slick with sweat. Every minute felt like an hour. Then I heard footsteps, soft, cautious. Sarah's key turning in the lock. I listened as she entered, saw her silhouette in the dim hallway light. She slipped off her shoes and my stomach clenched. I was about to find out the truth one way or another. I crept to the door, clutching my phone tight. I pressed record. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of hushed voices, muffled laughter, a soft gasp. I pushed the door open just enough to see. There they were, Sarah and Mark, tangled up on the couch, lips pressed together like they were trying to kiss away the guilt. The sight of her pressed against him made my chest tighten so painfully I thought I'd lose my breath. I froze there, stunned. I had the evidence now. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The betrayal was raw, searing. Sarah looked up, caught me in the act. Her face drained of color, eyes wide with shock and shame. Mark sat frozen, caught in the web of lies they'd spun around me. And that's when I knew I wasn't just going to let this slide. I was planning my revenge. I could feel the fire building inside me, a mix of rage and heartbreak. I'd shown myself the truth, and I was ready to do something about it. But what? That was just the beginning. I stayed there in the doorway, staring at her like I'd never seen her before. Her face was a picture of panic, eyes darting everywhere, lips trembling like she was about to cry, but I knew better. That look was guilt, and it burned me more than anything. Mark looked just as stunned, but I caught the flicker of something else. Relief. Like he'd been waiting for me to find out so he could get away with it. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there letting the scene sink in. My hands were trembling and my chest felt tight like I'd been punched in the rib cage. My mind was racing. How long has this been going on? Was it always like this? Was I just too blind or too stupid to see? The sickening truth hit me like a freight train. I'd been married to her for 6 years, and all that time she'd been sneaking around, lying, betraying me with my best friend. Sarah finally broke the silence. "I can explain," she started. Her voice cracked, desperate, trying to save herself, but I didn't want her words. I didn't care about explanations, not anymore. All I felt was a boiling rage ready to explode. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "Save it," I spat out. I saw enough. My voice came out hoarser than I wanted. "You lied for months, Sarah. While I was at my mother's funeral crying over her, you were in my bed with him." The words felt like daggers, but they were true. I looked at Mark, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "And you, Mark, how long has this been going on? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" They both stayed silent. I could see the shame in their faces, but I also saw something else, guilt mixed with defiance. That moment felt like a hinge, a pivotal point. Everything was shifting. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't want to act impulsively. Not yet. I needed to process this, to plan, to get everything straight so I could hit back hard. I backed out of the room slowly, the weight of what I'd just seen pressing down on me. My mind was spinning, but I was already forming a plan. I knew I couldn't just confront her and Mark and expect a neat resolution. No, I wanted to make them feel what I felt. Betrayal, humiliation, the loss of trust in the worst way. I'd seen enough to know I had to be smart about this. The next morning, I woke up with the ache of betrayal gnawing at my gut. I couldn't even eat breakfast. My hands still felt sweaty and my head was pounding. I kept replaying the scene in my mind over and over. I wasn't sure what I felt more, hurt or anger, probably a mix of both, but there was also something else, clarity. I understood now that I needed to control the narrative. I decided I'd catch them in the act again, but this time I'd be ready. I needed proof, undeniable proof. So I set up a little surveillance, nothing flashy, just enough to cover my bases. I left my phone recording at strategic points, kept close tabs on Mark's schedule, and watched every move Sarah made. It wasn't long before I saw the pattern. She was sneaking out late, meeting Mark at a place I'd never been, always with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The plan was simple. I'd catch them red-handed and show her that I knew everything. But I also knew I had to be careful. I couldn't leave any room for her to deny it anymore. Every sneaky glance, every late night, it all pointed to one thing. They were still lying, still sneaking around. The betrayal wasn't over yet, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. One night I waited in the dark, hiding behind a row of bushes near the place they always met. My palms were icy and slick. I could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the distant hum of cars. Then I saw her figure emerge from the shadows, phone in hand, her footsteps quick and nervous. She looked around, then slipped into Mark's car. That was it. I snapped pictures, recorded the scene, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. When I finally confronted her the next day, I told her I had everything: photos, videos, the messages. Her face twisted in shock and rage, but I just looked her in the eyes and said, "I know you've been lying, I know about the affair, and I've got proof. You're not going to get away with this." She broke down then, crying and pleading, but I didn't care. I'd already made up my mind. That day marked the beginning of my revenge. I would give her a taste of her own medicine, show her how it felt to be humiliated, to lose everything she thought she had. The betrayal was too deep, and I was done playing nice. The fallout was inevitable. I handed her the evidence, told her to leave and cut all contact. I knew this was just the start, but I also knew I'd take my time, make her regret every lie, every betrayal. Because in the end, nothing hurts more than knowing someone you trusted had been lying right to your face for months. After I handed her the evidence, photos, videos, and all the messages, I watched her crumble. Her face went pale, eyes darting around like she was searching for a way out. She begged, of course. Said she was sorry, that it was a mistake, that she loved me. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd heard enough hollow apologies. Save it, I snapped. You lied for months, during my mother's funeral no less. Do you even realize how betrayal like this feels? My voice was steady, but inside I was a mess of fury and heartbreak. I saw her shoulders shake with tears, but I couldn't let it faze me. Not now. I told her she needed to leave that day. I couldn't stand being under the same roof with her. Her face twisted with desperation, but I stood my ground. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I wanted her gone. Out of my life for good. I handed her the keys to her car, and she looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. When she finally left, I stayed in the house and poured myself a drink. I was numb, yet intensely aware of the emptiness that now filled everything inside me. My mind kept replaying the moments, her lying, the secret meetings, the betrayal. But amid all that, a strange sense of clarity started to form. I needed to do more than just kick her out. I needed to make a statement, a definitive move that would hit her where it hurt. Over the next few days, I collected more evidence. I had her phone, her email, her social media. I sifted through everything. I needed to understand the full extent of her lies. And I discovered something surprising. She'd been planning to leave me even before I found out. She'd been talking about it with Mark, plotting some kind of escape plan. The thought made my stomach churn. I realized I had more leverage than I thought. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about her trying to run away from the mess she'd created. I decided I'd give her a taste of her own medicine, not with anything violent or destructive, but with strategic revelation. I wanted her to feel the shame, the regret that I'd been feeling for weeks now. My plan was clear. I'd expose her to everyone, our friends, family, social circles. I wanted her to see what she'd lost, not just her marriage, but her reputation. I started drafting a message, cold, direct, unambiguous. I wasn't going to hold back anymore. She needed to know I wasn't going to be a silent victim. I called her that evening, voice calm but firm. "You're leaving," I said, "and I'm making sure everyone knows what you did. The truth doesn't stay hidden forever." Her voice cracked again, pleading, but I cut her off. "This is over. You're done messing around. Don't contact me again. If I see or hear from you, I'll make sure everyone knows about your little affair." The next step was confronting her family. I knew her mother, her sisters. They all loved her, but I had enough on her that I could make them see the real woman behind the facade. I arranged a meeting. When I finally sat down with her mother, I looked her straight in the eye and laid it out. "Your daughter betrayed me during the hardest time of my life. I have proof. I want you to know the truth because I think she owes you that much." Her mother's face was a mixture of shock and disappointment. She looked at her daughter, who was crying silently, unable to speak. I could see the moment of realization in her mother's eyes, the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak. That's when I knew I'd done what I needed. I'd exposed enough, not just to hurt her, but to make her face the consequences of her actions. With the truth out, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of secrecy was finally lifted. I didn't want revenge just for the sake of revenge. I wanted her to understand that betrayal doesn't go unpunished. And I wanted her to know I was done being silent. I'd lost someone I loved, but I'd also gained clarity. This was the end of a chapter I never wanted to read again. As I watched her pack her things, I realized I was already moving on. It wasn't about revenge for revenge sake, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I knew I had to stay strong, keep my head clear, and never let her manipulate me again. I had more to do, more to prove. But for now, this was a crucial step forward. I stood in the doorway as she left. The house felt emptier than ever. My heart was heavy, but I also felt a strange flicker of hope. I'd taken control of my story again. And I promised myself, from this moment on, I'd focus on healing. But I also knew I'd never let someone betray me like that and get away without consequences. The days following her departure felt surreal. My house was eerily quiet, like the walls themselves were mourning. I moved through the rooms, each step heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. I thought about her, about Mark, about the months of lies, and I felt this mix of rage and emptiness knotting inside my chest. But beneath that, there was a strange clarity, an understanding that I couldn't just let this slide or pretend it never happened. I knew I had to go beyond just ending things with her. She needed to feel the full impact of what she'd done. It wasn't enough to kick her out and walk away clean. No, I wanted her to really understand what betrayal costs. That's when the idea for my revenge started to take shape. It was subtle, calculated, designed to leave her feeling exposed and humiliated just like I felt. I spent the next week carefully planning. I started by compiling every shred of evidence I had, screenshots of her messages, recordings of her meetings, photos of her and Mark. I wanted everything in one place. Then I drafted a plan to make her regret her decisions, not in a destructive way, but in a way that hit her where it mattered, her reputation, her credibility, her social standing. The first step, I reached out to her closest friends and family, but I did it quietly. No need for a dramatic showdown right away, just enough to make them aware of what she'd done without sounding like a man scorned. I told her mother I had proof, that she needed to know the truth. I sent the evidence securely, making sure it wouldn't be dismissed as hearsay. I didn't want her to deny or dismiss what I had. Next, I crafted a message, a single, straightforward email sent to her friends and colleagues. It detailed her betrayal, attached snippets of the evidence, and explained my reasoning. I kept it respectful but firm. I made sure they understood this wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, but about holding someone accountable for their actions. I wanted her fall to be as public as possible, but I also wanted her to know I was doing it with purpose. The response was immediate. I started getting messages from mutual friends, some shocked, some angry. A few reached out directly, asking for details. I responded cautiously, never revealing more than I needed to. I made it clear that I didn't want to destroy her life, but I couldn't let her get away with the lies and deception. I wanted her to face the consequences of her choices. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on her social media profiles, just to see how she was handling everything. Turns out she was trying to spin it, posting vague quotes about truth, trust, and learning from mistakes. It was obvious she was trying to save face, but I knew better. The damage was done. Her carefully crafted image was crumbling, and I made sure everyone knew why. One evening, I received a message from Mark, probably thinking he was clever, trying to reach out privately. I responded immediately, telling him I knew everything. I told him I'd gathered enough evidence to make sure the truth was out in the open. I warned him that if he ever tried to contact me again, I'd escalate things. I wasn't interested in threats, but I wanted him to understand I was serious. That was the moment I realized I'd crossed a line, no more hiding behind silence or denial. I was going to make sure they both felt the fallout. I could feel the weight lifting, but also the tension building. I knew this wasn't over yet. The final blow was coming, and I was ready to deliver it. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, not just for me, but for everyone around her who trusted her. I wanted her to understand, finally, that betrayal isn't something you get away with. Not anymore. As I sat in my empty house that night, I wondered how she was feeling, how her world was crumbling around her. I didn't feel victorious exactly. I felt hollow but also resolute. I'd taken back control. I'd shown her that honesty, even brutal honesty, was the only way forward. And I knew that in the end she'd have to face herself in the mirror and confront what she'd done. That's when I made one more move. I printed out all the evidence, neatly organized, and put it in an envelope. I knew her address, her workplace, and her social circles. I decided that she needed a final reminder of her actions, something that would hit her where it hurt the most. I drove to her apartment early the next morning. I approached her door, heart pounding but with a clear mind. I slipped the envelope through her mail slot with a note attached. "This is what you've done. You can't run from it." I turned away without knocking, watching her door from a distance as she found the evidence. That moment felt like the closing of a chapter. I knew I'd done what I could. Now it was just about letting her face the fallout. I'd made my point, and I realized one thing for sure: betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes taking back your power is the sweetest revenge of all. The day I left that envelope in her mailbox, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I had finally laid everything bare, proof of her lies, her betrayal, the entire web she'd spun with Mark. Watching her find it, I imagined her face when she opened that note. That image, her eyes skimming the evidence, her face draining of color, gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. It was the final blow, or so I told myself. But I knew better. Revenge isn't a single act, it's a process, a slow unraveling of what's false and fragile. And so I kept my distance, letting her stew in her own mess. I went back to my routine, though everything felt different. I was different. I was no longer the naive guy who trusted blindly. Now I was a man who'd seen betrayal, who'd fought back, who'd taken control. The next few days, I watched from afar as her social media profile started to change. She deleted photos, scrubbed her feeds of our shared moments. She was trying to hide, trying to erase what she'd done. But I knew better. I had already shown her that secrets only last so long. The damage was done and her reputation was already starting to crumble. One night I got a text from an old friend, someone I'd known since school. He'd heard rumors, seen some of the fallout, and wanted to know what was really going on. I told him the truth, nothing sugar-coated. I explained how she cheated, lied, and tried to run away. I was honest about my pain, but also about my resolve. When I finished, he replied simply, "Good. No one should get away with that." That was when I realized the full extent of my actions. I'd done what I set out to do, not just to hurt her, but to make her understand the seriousness of what she'd lost. I didn't need to punish her further. The evidence, the fallout, the social shame, it was enough. The ball was in her court now. She'd have to face the consequences, and I didn't plan to look back. But even with the revenge complete, I couldn't escape the aftermath. Friends who once trusted her started to distance themselves. Mutual acquaintances looked at her differently. Some reached out to me privately, expressing their shock or disappointment. I didn't seek sympathy. I simply let them see the truth. That's when I realized how much damage a betrayal like this can do, not just to me, but to everyone who was caught in the crossfire. One moment I was sitting alone in my apartment, reflecting. My hand ran over the surface of my coffee table, feeling the groove where I'd slammed my fist in frustration after discovering everything. I was so angry then, so betrayed. But now I felt strangely lighter. Like I'd finally taken control, like I'd taken back what was mine. Still, I wrestled with questions. Did I do enough? Was there more I should have done? The truth is, I don't have all the answers. I only know that I couldn't let her get away with what she did. Not without consequences. Not without me making sure she knew that betrayal doesn't go unpunished forever. And now, as I sit here writing this, I realize what I've learned. The most powerful revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming your dignity, standing tall amid the ruins, and refusing to let betrayal define you. Because if you do, you win in the end, even if it's just over your own pain. So here's what I'd tell anyone in a similar situation. Don't rush to act out of pure anger. Gather your evidence, plan your moves, and be strategic. The truth always comes out, and carrying the weight of lies will eventually crush them. And you, if you're not careful, take control, be honest with yourself, and don't be afraid to walk away when the time is right. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about setting yourself free. I'm still healing, still trying to rebuild, but I know one thing. I'll never again let someone betray me and walk away without repercussions. Not because I want revenge, but because I deserve respect. And that's the only thing worth fighting for. Weeks turned into months, and gradually the storm inside me started to settle. I kept my distance from her, let the fallout do its work. Each day I felt a little stronger, more in control of my life. The house was still empty, but I no longer felt the hollow ache of betrayal. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, on reclaiming my sense of self. It was a slow process, but it was mine again. One day I went to the courthouse. I brought all the evidence I had collected, screenshots, messages, the letter I left in her mailbox. I handed over the papers to start the legal process of divorce. The act was simple, but it felt monumental. I watched her sign the papers, her hand trembling, her face etched with regret. I didn't say much, no dramatic speeches, no shouting, just signed, sealed, and delivered. I wanted her to feel the finality of it. As I turned to leave, she looked up at me, eyes swollen and red. For a second I saw a flicker of genuine remorse. Maybe she finally understood what she'd lost. Maybe she realized that betrayal has a way of destroying everything: trust, love, reputation. But I didn't let that moment sway me. I had already decided. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a strange peace. Not that I was over what happened, no, that would take time, but I had taken the steps needed to move forward. I'd faced the worst, uncovered the truth, and reclaimed my dignity. In that moment, I knew I'd done everything I could to close that chapter. Back home, I packed up her belongings. It was a simple process: clothes, keepsakes, anything that reminded me of her. I put it all in a box and took it to the local charity. It felt symbolic, like shedding the past, making space for the future. As I carried the box out, I looked at my house, the place that held so many memories, some good, some terrible, and realized that I was finally ready to start over. The truth is, betrayal leaves scars, but it also teaches you resilience. You learn who you really are when everything you believed in shatters. I learned that trusting blindly only leaves you vulnerable. I learned the importance of confronting lies head-on. And I learned that revenge, real or perceived, is ultimately about reclaiming your power. Now I focus on myself. I've started therapy, reconnected with old friends, and set new goals. I refuse to let what happened define me. It's a long road, and I still have days when the pain resurfaces, but I know I'm stronger than I was. I've learned that sometimes the only way to heal is to face the truth, accept it, and move forward. If there's one thing I want to share, it's this: never allow betrayal to strip you of your self-respect. Confront it, expose it, and then walk away with your head held high. Revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reclaiming your dignity. That's what truly heals a broken heart: to stand tall and say, I deserve better and I won't be broken by this. So, I handed over the keys to my house, the papers to my future, and I closed that chapter forever. And as I do, I remind myself that life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning how to rise above it. And I'm finally doing just that.